Lena was scrolling aimlessly through her phone, her thoughts a jumbled mess, when a single notification caught her eye. The message was from Alex, her partner, the man she trusted with her heart. The text read simply, "We need to talk." Her heart dropped into her stomach. She had been expecting something like this, but the words still shook her to her core. Her mind raced, playing out the worst scenarios: betrayal, lies, abandonment. When Alex came home later that night, he was unusually quiet, his eyes avoiding hers. The air between them felt thick, suffocating, as if something unspoken hung in the balance. "We need to talk," Alex repeated, his voice trembling slightly. Lena's throat tightened. "What is it, Alex?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, unsure if she could hear the truth she knew was coming. He looked at her, his eyes filled with guilt. "I've been seeing someone else," he confessed, his words slicing through the silence like a blade. Lena froze, her body going numb, her mind struggling to process the weight of his words. The room felt like it was spinning. How could he? She had loved him, with everything she had. And now, everything they had built together lay shattered, like glass scattered on the floor. The days after the conversation with Alex were a blur for Lena. She moved through life like a ghost, unable to fully feel or understand the pain she was carrying. She didn't want to face anyone, not even her closest friends. She shut herself off, her apartment becoming a sanctuary of solitude. Sophie, her best friend, called her every day, but Lena couldn't bring herself to talk. Thought of explaining everything, the betrayal, the lies, the broken trust, seemed like too much. One night, Sophie showed up at her door, persistent and worried. "Lena, please, you need to talk to someone," Sophie pleaded, her voice soft but insistent. Lena opened the door, her eyes red from crying. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. Sophie hugged her tightly, her voice full of love and understanding. "You don't have to know yet," Sophie said. "We'll figure this out together." Lena sat with Sophie, trying to piece together her shattered thoughts. "I don't even know where to begin," Lena said, her voice hoarse. "I thought we had everything, but now I can't even look at him." Sophie reached out, her hand gently resting on Lena's. "It's okay to be angry," Sophie reassured her. "It's okay to feel lost." Lena's eyes filled with tears once more as the weight of the betrayal hit her again. "I feel like I've lost a part of myself," she confessed. Sophie nodded, her voice steady. "You'll find that part again. This is just a moment, a dark one, but it's not the end." Lena didn't know how to move forward. Every day felt like a battle. She kept replaying the moments she and Alex shared, questioning every conversation, every touch. She tried to go out, to meet people, but it always ended with her retreating back into herself, consumed by the memories. Her therapist suggested she try journaling her feelings. At first, the idea felt stupid. How could writing ever heal her? But one day, sitting alone in her room, she gave it a shot. She wrote about the pain, the fear, the confusion. As the words spilled onto the page, something inside her shifted. It wasn't much, but it was the first step toward healing. Over the next few days, Lena felt a small flickering sense of strength begin to rise within her. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her going. She wasn't ready to forgive Alex, and she wasn't sure if she ever would be, but she knew that the pain couldn't last forever. Healing wasn't linear. It would take time. "I don't know where this road leads," Lena thought, "but for the first time I feel like I can keep walking." Lena's days felt like they were blending together. Each one passed in a haze of exhaustion and numbness. She wasn't sure she was living or just existing. Her friends tried to help, but the pain felt too big to share. It wasn't that she didn't want to let them in, it was that no one could understand what she was going through. Only she truly knew how it felt to be betrayed by someone she had loved so deeply. Sophie called again that afternoon, but Lena ignored the phone. She wasn't ready to face her feelings, much less talk about them. The silence of the apartment was suffocating, yet it gave her the space to grieve, even if it wasn't healing her. She couldn't move forward. How could she when the past still had a hold on her? Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Alex's face, his smile, his warmth, the way he had made her feel special. But now, it was all a lie. A haunting reminder that nothing could be trusted. What now? Lena whispered to herself as she stared at the ceiling, too tired to even cry. How do I heal from this? The next day, Sophie showed up at her door, unannounced, determination in her eyes. Lena opened it reluctantly, but Sophie didn't wait for an invitation. She walked in, sat on the couch, and simply said, "You're not okay, and that's okay." Lena swallowed, the lump in her throat thickening. Sophie didn't push her to talk. Instead, she just sat there, offering quiet support. "You don't have to pretend anymore," Sophie continued, her voice gentle. "You can cry or scream or be angry, but you don't have to do it alone." Lena sat beside her, her face contorted with emotion. She wanted to say so much, to ask for help, to explain how much pain she was in, but the words didn't come. Instead, she let the tears fall. Sophie wrapped an arm around her. "I'm here for you," she whispered. Lena leaned into her friend, finally letting go. The tears, the hurt, it all came pouring out. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. Lena's thoughts bounced between anger and sadness, regret and yearning. She knew she couldn't keep hiding from her feelings, but the thought of facing them head-on terrified her. She started taking small steps, trying to engage in things that once brought her joy, like reading or walking through the park. But the world felt muted, as if she were watching everything through a foggy window. On one of her walks, Lena found herself sitting on a bench by the lake, watching the water ripple gently. The stillness of the scene struck her. She realized that, like the water, she too needed to let go of the heaviness. The past could only weigh her down if she allowed it to. "Let it go," she told herself. "The future doesn't live in the past." She closed her eyes for a moment, the breeze on her face soothing her raw nerves. It wasn't healing yet, but it was a start. Lena's therapist suggested she write down her feelings, even if it felt uncomfortable at first. It was a way to release everything that was trapped inside. So Lena began to journal, hesitantly at first, but as the pages filled, she began to see a shift. She wrote about the betrayal, about how it felt like a knife to the heart, and how the trust they had built was now nothing but dust. She wrote about Alex, his apology, and how those words had once been enough to make her forgive him. But now she realized, it wasn't the words that needed to change. It was her heart. She had let it stay open for too long, even after the hurt had seeped in. It was time to close it. She wasn't ready for love yet, but she was ready to love herself again. The writing didn't magically fix everything, but it made her feel lighter, more in control. Maybe healing didn't have to happen all at once. Maybe it was okay to take it slow. Weeks passed, and Lena began to feel the weight of her own growth. She wasn't completely healed, but she wasn't stuck either. She took up new hobbies, tried new things, and even made plans to travel. She wasn't waiting for anyone to save her anymore. She was learning how to save herself. Sophie continued to be her anchor, encouraging her every step of the way. One evening, as they shared a bottle of wine on Lena's balcony, Sophie said, "You're stronger than you know, Lena." It wasn't just the words that mattered. It was the truth in them. Lena smiled, for the first time in a long while, truly smiling. She was starting to believe it herself. The first real step forward came unexpectedly. Lena had signed up for a weekend retreat on a whim, something to distract her from the overwhelming quiet of her apartment. It wasn't about running away, it was about finding a new perspective. The retreat was held in the mountains, surrounded by dense trees and the sound of running water. She arrived feeling skeptical, unsure of what to expect. The first few hours were uncomfortable. She didn't know anyone, and the group activities felt forced. But as the weekend went on, something inside her began to shift. They meditated by the lake, practiced yoga under the trees, and shared their stories. Lena listened intently, hearing others express emotions she had kept buried for so long. That night, as she lay in bed, she allowed herself to reflect on the journey she had been on, the pain, the betrayal, and the slow, steady healing. Maybe I can do this, she thought for the first time in a long while. Maybe I can find myself again. When Lena returned home, she felt different. It wasn't a dramatic change, but there was a subtle shift in how she viewed herself and the world around her. She no longer felt like a victim of her circumstances. The pain still existed, but it was no longer her entire story. One evening, while walking home from a coffee shop, she stopped at a bookshop window and saw a novel she had always wanted to read. On impulse, she bought it. It seemed trivial, but in that moment, it felt like a small act of self-love. Something she was doing for herself. As she flipped through the pages that night, she realized she hadn't picked up a book for pleasure in months. She had allowed the world of her pain to consume her. But now, she was reclaiming those small joys. She had always loved reading, and this was her way of starting to love herself again. Lena began to see her therapist more regularly, each session revealing layers of herself that she had long ignored. She discussed her fear of being alone, her struggle with trusting others, and her constant need for validation. Slowly, she started to uncover her own insecurities, things she had buried under the guise of independence. One day, after a particularly deep conversation, her therapist asked, "What would it take for you to believe you are enough, just as you are?" The question hung in the air for a long time before Lena could respond. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe I've never really believed it." She left that session feeling lighter, like a door had opened inside her. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to fix everything right away. Healing was a process, and it was okay to move at her own pace. Lena found herself reflecting on the people she had allowed into her life, both the good and the bad. She realized that she had spent so much time giving her energy to others, trying to fix broken relationships, that she had neglected herself. It was time to change that. She started doing things alone, enjoying meals by herself, taking walks without the need to rush, and even going to a movie on a Sunday afternoon. It felt liberating. She wasn't depending on anyone for validation anymore. One evening, she sat at a cafe with a book in front of her, but her thoughts wandered. She was finally understanding what it meant to be okay with being alone. She didn't need someone else to fill the silence in her life. She was enough just as she was. One afternoon, Lena was walking in the park when she noticed a couple sitting on a bench, laughing together. For a brief moment, she felt a pang of longing, the desire for a connection she had once believed was impossible without someone else. But then she stopped, took a deep breath, and realized something important. She didn't need anyone to complete her. She had always believed that love was what made a life worth living, but now she saw that she could have a full, meaningful life on her own. Her journey wasn't about finding someone else, it was about discovering herself, her own worth, and how to live in a way that honored her past without letting it define her future. As she continued walking, a sense of peace washed over her. She was no longer looking for love from others. She was learning to love herself. Lena had spent months trying to move on, but fate had a way of reminding her of the past. One day, she ran into Alex at the grocery store. He looked the same, though there was something different about him, a sadness in his eyes that mirrored her own. "Lena," he said, his voice shaky. "I didn't think I'd see you here." Lena froze, unsure of how to react. Her heart raced, and the memories rushed back, but she held herself steady. "I didn't expect to see you either," she replied, her voice calm but distant. Alex stepped closer, his hands trembling. "I've been thinking about you, about us," he started, but Lena cut him off. "Don't," she said, her voice firm. "We've been over this. There's nothing left for us." Alex flinched, his face falling. "I never wanted to hurt you," he whispered. But Lena couldn't shake the feeling that his words were hollow, just like before. She had to walk away. She couldn't let him back in. Later that evening, Lena sat in her apartment, her mind racing. The encounter with Alex had shaken her more than she expected. She tried to focus on the task at hand, but every thought led back to him. Why did he have to show up now? What did he want from her? Sophie called, sensing Lena's distress. You're quiet, Sophie said, her voice laced with concern. Lena sighed. I saw him today, Alex. There was a pause on the other end of the line. And? Sophie asked. I don't know, Lena replied. I feel lost. I've come so far, and now it feels like everything's unraveling again. Sophie's tone softened. You're stronger than this, Lena. You don't have to let him back in. You've been healing. Don't let him disrupt that. Lena knew Sophie was right, but the emotional pull of Alex's presence was hard to ignore. I'm trying, Lena whispered. I really am. The next few days were filled with quiet tension. Lena couldn't stop replaying her conversation with Alex, and the question of whether to forgive him lingered in her mind. But as she walked through the park, her thoughts began to shift. She realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for her. She couldn't keep holding on to this anger, this grief. It was eating her alive. I have to let go, she said aloud to herself, the words feeling like a release. She wasn't ready to invite Alex back into her life, but she was ready to let go of the chains he had placed around her heart. She took a deep breath and walked on, the weight lifting slightly with each step. The healing wasn't complete, but this was progress. She wasn't waiting for him anymore. She was finally moving forward on her own terms. Lena spent the next few days focusing on herself. She started journaling more, allowing herself to vent her frustrations and fears without fear of judgment. She made small changes to her routine, carving out time for activities that made her feel whole again. One evening, as she sat at her desk, Lena glanced at the photo of her and Alex that had been tucked away in the corner. It had once been a symbol of love, but now it felt like a distant memory. Slowly, she stood and walked over to it. With a steady hand, she removed the photo from the frame and placed it in a drawer. I'm done, she whispered to herself. She didn't need that reminder anymore. Her past was just that, past. It didn't define who she was, and it wasn't going to hold her back any longer. The following weekend, Lena decided to visit her parents. She hadn't seen them in a while, and though the thought of it made her anxious, she knew it was time to reconnect. As she entered her childhood home, the familiar scent of her mother's cooking filled the air. Her parents were happy to see her, but it was her father who caught her off guard. You've changed, he said, looking at her with a knowing smile. You seem stronger, more at peace. Lena was taken aback. Really? She asked, surprised by the observation. Yeah, her dad replied. I can see it in your eyes. You're not the same person who left here a few months ago. Lena's eyes welled up, but she quickly wiped them away. I'm still healing, she admitted. But I'm getting there. Her father nodded, pulling her into a hug. We're proud of you, he said softly. Lena hugged him back, feeling a warmth in her heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't completely healed yet, but the road ahead felt a little less daunting. It had been a few weeks since Lena's visit to her parents, and her life had started to take on a new rhythm. She felt more grounded in her own skin. But even as the days passed, the pain from her past lingered in the back of her mind. One afternoon, as she sat in a cafe, flipping through a book, she overheard a conversation between two strangers. The woman spoke of love, of trust, and the delicate balance between vulnerability and protection. Lena's heart skipped a beat, her thoughts drifting back to Alex. It had been months, yet she realized something. She was still holding on to the idea of him. Why? She asked herself. What would it take for me to let go completely? She knew the answer wasn't simple, but it was something she needed to confront. She wasn't ready to forgive him yet, but she had to stop letting his absence dictate her future. With a deep breath, Lena made a decision. I can't keep living in the past, she whispered to herself, the weight of her realization settling in. It's time to truly move on. That evening, Lena found herself walking through the park. The cool air felt good on her skin, and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot provided a comforting rhythm. She had walked this path countless times before, but tonight felt different. She felt the need to be alone with her thoughts. As she walked, memories of Alex resurfaced, their late-night talks, their shared dreams, and the way he used to make her feel special. But as each memory floated to the surface, Lena didn't feel the same pang of pain that she had before. She was starting to realize that those memories were hers to keep, but they no longer had the power to control her. She had a right to those moments, but they didn't define her. She paused by the same lake where she had sat weeks earlier, and for the first time, she felt at peace. "I'm ready to let go," she said aloud, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. The truth of her words echoed in the silence, and for the first time she believed them. The next day, Lena received a text from Alex. It was short. "Can we talk?" She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. For a brief moment, the urge to respond overwhelmed her. She wanted closure. She wanted to understand what went wrong. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted to hear him say he was sorry. But as she looked at the message again, something inside her clicked. She didn't need his apology to move forward. She didn't need anything from him. She had spent so much time waiting for answers that she had forgotten to ask herself the most important question: what do I need to heal? With a deep breath, Lena deleted the message. She didn't need closure from him. She was ready to close the chapter on her own. Lena spent the following weeks rediscovering who she was outside of her relationship with Alex. She took up painting, something she had always wanted to try but had never made time for. Each brushstroke felt like an act of self-expression, a way to channel her emotions into something beautiful. She also started taking weekend trips, exploring new places, meeting new people, and experiencing life in ways she had never imagined. It was exhilarating. One evening, while watching the sunset on a trip to the coast, Lena realized something she hadn't fully acknowledged before. She was happy. Not because of anyone else, but because of who she had become. She wasn't looking for someone else to fill the void anymore. She was learning to fill it herself. A few months later, Lena found herself sitting in a cafe with Sophie, reflecting on everything she had gone through. "I never thought I'd get here," Lena said, a smile playing on her lips. "I didn't think I could ever let go of him, but here I am." Sophie smiled back, her eyes soft with understanding. "You've done the hard work, Lena. You've taken control of your life." Lena nodded, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "It wasn't easy," she admitted, "but I've learned that I don't need anyone to validate my worth. I've learned to love myself, and that's enough." Sophie reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You've always been enough," she said warmly. Lena smiled, her heart full. "I know that now." Lena woke up to a quiet morning, the kind that felt peaceful, without the lingering weight of uncertainty. Her apartment, once a place filled with memories of Alex, now felt like a true home. As she sat by the window, sipping her coffee, she felt a sense of belonging, not just in the world, but in herself. Over the past months, she had rebuilt herself from the ground up. She was no longer defined by her past, by her heartbreak. Instead, she was becoming someone stronger, someone more resilient. A thought crossed her mind. The world was full of possibilities, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. "I've come so far," she whispered, a soft smile curling on her lips. "But this is just the beginning." A week later, Lena attended a support group for people going through similar experiences. She wasn't sure what to expect, but as she sat in the circle, listening to others share their stories, she felt a deep sense of connection. She was no longer alone in her pain. Everyone had their battles, their scars, but here, in this room, Lena felt accepted. She shared her story, and for the first time, the words didn't feel like they were just pouring out of her. They felt empowering. "I was afraid of facing my own heart," Lena said, her voice steady. "But now I'm starting to trust myself again." There was no shame in her words, only strength. The room filled with nods and smiles, and Lena realized that healing didn't have to be a solitary journey. She could walk this path with others. Lena continued to rediscover herself, one step at a time. She traveled more, each trip a new chapter of self-exploration. On one of these trips, she visited a small town by the coast. The salty air, the sound of waves crashing, and the breathtaking sunsets made her feel more alive than she had in years. She met new people, learned new things, and for the first time in a long time, Lena felt truly free. One evening, while walking along the beach, she stopped and looked out over the water. The setting sun painted the sky with shades of orange and pink. This is what peace looks like, she thought. And in that moment, she realized that happiness wasn't something she had to search for. It was something she could create, piece by piece, every day. Back home, Lena decided to go through her old things. She found a box filled with mementos from her past, including letters from Alex, photos, and gifts. She didn't feel the same pain she once did when she looked at them. Instead, she saw the journey she had been on. The love, the heartbreak, the healing. It was all part of her story. Lena smiled softly and carefully placed the box in the back of the closet. She wasn't going to throw it away. It was a part of her, but it wasn't going to control her anymore. She had learned the importance of letting go, not of the memories, but of the hold they had over her. "Thank you for the lessons," she whispered, closing the closet door. It was a small act, but it was freeing. As the weeks passed, Lena continued to feel more at ease with herself. She had made new connections, but she no longer felt the desperate need for validation from others. She was learning to embrace her own company. One evening, while sitting on her balcony, Lena looked up at the stars. She felt a sense of wonder, not just at the vastness of the universe, but at the depth of her own journey. She had come so far from where she had started, from a place of heartbreak and loss to one of strength and self-acceptance. Lena was no longer searching for something to fill the empty spaces in her life. She had learned that the key to happiness lay within herself, in the quiet moments of reflection, in the small victories, and in the freedom to be who she truly was. "This is who I'm meant to be," she thought, as the night sky enveloped her in its stillness. And for the first time, Lena knew it was enough. Lena woke up to the first rays of the morning sun, a soft light filling her room. She smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. She had come to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about learning to live with it and move forward. As she got ready for the day, she no longer saw herself as broken or incomplete. She was whole, just as she was. This is the beginning, Lena thought, of something new. Lena met Sophie for coffee that morning, both of them laughing as they shared a moment of lightness. "You've changed," Sophie remarked, smiling. Lena nodded. "I've finally found myself again." Sophie squeezed her hand, proud. "I'm so glad, Lena. You deserve to be happy." Lena looked out the cafe window, reflecting. "I think I've found happiness, not in anyone else, but in myself." Lena spent the afternoon at the beach, walking along the shore with the cool breeze brushing against her skin. She wasn't looking for answers or closure anymore. She had everything she needed right here, within herself. As the waves crashed against the shore, Lena felt a deep sense of gratitude for the person she had become. "This is peace," she whispered to herself, feeling at home in her own heart. That evening, Lena attended a small gathering of friends she had met during her journey. As she looked around, she realized how much she had changed. She had built new connections, not out of desperation, but from a place of mutual respect and understanding. She was no longer afraid of being vulnerable, because she had learned to trust herself. Lena felt a deep sense of pride in her own resilience. She was no longer searching for external validation. She had everything she needed within. Lena stood outside, the sun setting behind her. She felt a deep sense of peace, as if she had finally come full circle. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had made her stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about accepting it and moving forward with grace. As the last rays of sunlight bathed her in warmth, Lena whispered, "I'm ready for whatever comes next."